Picture this. It's 40,000 years ago. Night has fallen over a small camp on the edge of a forest. A fire crackles in the center. Around it sit a dozen humans. Hunters, mothers, children, elders. Somewhere out in the dark, a low growl rolls across the grass. Everyone tenses. Everyone knows what that sound means. But here's the strange part. That growl? That's not the thing that's going to kill most of them. The tiger in the dark is terrifying. Yes, it's fast, it's powerful, it has teeth built for tearing flesh. But a tiger is a problem you can see. You can run. You can throw a spear. You can climb. You can, at the very least, understand it. What actually ended most human lives for the first 300,000 years of our species' existence wasn't claws or fangs at all. It was something with no face, no roar, and no warning. Something that could kill an entire camp without ever being seen. This is the story of humanity's real oldest enemy, and why our brains are still built around fighting it. Let's start with the numbers, because they tell a story most people never hear. Anthropologists who study skeletal remains from prehistoric sites have found something surprising. Deaths from predator attacks, lions, wolves, big cats, show up in the fossil record, but they're relatively rare. A healthy adult in a group, near a fire with weapons, was a hard target. Predators generally prefer easier prey. What shows up far more often in ancient remains are signs of something else entirely. Malnutrition, parasitic infection, bone infections, evidence of diseases that left no dramatic scene, no blood trail, no story to tell around the fire, just someone who got sick and then didn't get better. Here's the unsettling truth. For most of human history, the average life expectancy hovered somewhere around 30 to 35 years. Not because people were being eaten by predators in dramatic showdowns, but because an invisible world of microbes, infections, and contamination was quietly picking people off, one at a time, in ways nobody understood. A tiger you could see coming. A pathogen you couldn't. Now, here's where it gets interesting from a psychological standpoint. Human beings are exceptional pattern recognition machines. Our ancestors survived by learning to read the environment. Footprints, broken branches, the particular silence that falls over a forest right before something dangerous approaches. Fear, in this context, is a tool. It's a warning system built on visible, learnable cues. But disease breaks that system completely. You can't read a footprint left by a pathogen. You can't hear it approaching. Someone in your group could be carrying something lethal and look completely normal, right up until they didn't. There was no pattern to learn because the enemy didn't leave the kind of evidence a hunter-gatherer brain was built to detect. This created a very specific, very deep kind of dread. The fear not of a thing, but of an absence of information. Psychologists today call this ambiguity aversion. Humans are measurably more anxious about uncertain, invisible risks than about risks that are large but well understood. Ancient humans lived permanently inside that kind of uncertainty. Every illness was, in a sense, a monster with no shape. So what do you do when you can't see the threat, can't track it, and can't fight it with a spear? You do the only thing a social species can do. You build behavior around it. Archaeologists and anthropologists studying ancient and modern hunter-gatherer societies have found remarkably consistent patterns worldwide that look a lot like early public health systems, even though nobody would have called them that. Isolation practices. Groups from Papua New Guinea to the Arctic developed customs of separating the sick from the healthy, long before anyone understood what a pathogen was. A person with certain symptoms might be moved to their own shelter, away from the group, not out of cruelty, but out of an intuitive, hard-won understanding. Whatever this is, it spreads. Ritual cleansing. Water, smoke, fire, and specific plants show up again and again in burial customs and healing rituals across unconnected ancient cultures. Many of these substances, we now know, actually do have antimicrobial properties. Ash, certain smoke compounds, boiling water. Ancient humans didn't know the microbiology, but through generations of trial, error, and death, they discovered what worked, and they wrapped it in ritual so it would be remembered and obeyed. Taboos around corpses and specific foods. Across dozens of ancient societies, strict rules developed around handling the dead, certain undercooked meats, and stagnant water. These weren't arbitrary superstitions. They were survival knowledge, disguised as culture so it could be passed down without anyone needing to understand the why. In other words, long before germ theory, long before microscopes, humans built an entire invisible defense system out of ritual, taboo, and instinct. Culture itself became a kind of immune response. But disease wasn't the only unseen threat shaping the ancient human mind. There was a second one, just as dangerous, and arguably even more psychologically powerful: exile. For a modern person, being excluded from a group is uncomfortable. For a Paleolithic human, it was often a death sentence. No tribe meant no shared fire, no shared food, no group defense against predators, and no help if you got hurt. Survival wasn't really an individual project, it was a collective one. This is why researchers believe humans evolved such an intensely sensitive social alarm system. Brain imaging studies have shown that social rejection activates some of the very same neural regions as physical pain. Being frozen out by the group wasn't just emotionally uncomfortable. To an ancient brain, it registered as a genuine threat to survival, on par with injury. And just like disease, social rejection is invisible. You can't see it coming the way you see a predator's eyes in the dark. It creeps in through small shifts: a colder tone, being left out of a hunt, whispered conversations that stop when you walk up. There's no roar to warn you, just a slow, quiet unraveling of the thing keeping you alive: belonging. This is arguably the reason humans became such intensely social, gossip-driven, reputation-obsessed creatures. Managing your standing in the group wasn't vanity, it was survival strategy against an invisible killer just as real as any pathogen. There's one more invisible threat worth mentioning, and it's the one that arguably shaped human imagination more than any other: the dark itself, and everything the mind filled it with. Night, for early humans, meant reduced visibility, reduced hunting ability, and heightened vulnerability. But it also meant something psychologically deeper. It meant not knowing. And the human brain, faced with a gap in information, does something remarkable. It fills that gap with a story. This is likely one of the evolutionary roots of myth-making itself. Spirits, ancestors, unseen forces in the forest. Many anthropologists argue these weren't just religious impulses, but cognitive coping mechanisms. If you can't see the threat, at least you can name it. A named threat, even an imagined one, feels more manageable than a formless unknown. Fear of the thing in the dark became fear of specific spirits, specific gods, specific rules to follow to stay safe. And suddenly, the unbearable uncertainty had a shape again. Here's the part that should give you chills. We never stopped being those people. Modern humans are still, on average, far more afraid of invisible, ambiguous threats than visible, well-understood ones, even when the visible threat is statistically more dangerous. People report more anxiety about airborne viruses, contamination, or unseen chemicals than about car accidents, despite driving being, by orders of magnitude, more statistically dangerous to most people's lives. We're still deeply wired to fear social exclusion more than we logically should, checking notifications, worrying about being left out, rereading messages for tone. Our brains still treat that ancient signal, the group might be pulling away from me, as a 5-alarm survival emergency. And we still, even now, tell ourselves stories to fill in the gaps of what we don't understand. Conspiracy theories, urban legends, ghost stories, different clothing, same ancient mechanism, turning a formless unknown into something with a name. Because a named fear is a fear you can, at least in theory, do something about. So the next time you feel a strange unease about something you can't quite explain, a room that feels off, a person you don't quite trust, a risk you can't name, remember, that feeling is ancient. It's older than agriculture, older than language, maybe older than fire itself. The tiger was never really the monster. The monster was always the thing you couldn't see coming. And in a very real sense, some part of your brain is still standing at that fire, still scanning the dark, not for teeth and claws, but for the shapeless things that teeth and claws could never protect us from.